Excited to take the Jaguar out for the first drive in weeks, I threw open the curtains and, well, realised I wasn't going to be. Despite the national restrictions, there's still a few bits us petrolheads can be getting on with. In light of the UK's winter, I took my coffee into the garage and would spend some time with the car instead by getting her looking great for all of the car shows that wouldn't be happening this year due to the national restrictions. The cover came off again and I set to work on a few jobs that needed doing now the rear brakes and tyres had been done in the last video. The trickle charger was doing its thing. It was currently performing a battery recondition which maximises the performance of even healthy batteries by going through a cycle of different currents, discharging and then recharging the battery to ensure its longevity. It was nice to spend some time with the car despite the weather by completing a few odd jobs. Before my coffee went cold, I reached for a sip. Despite a lapse in concentration and no chance of me now getting chapped lips due to Castrol's finest blend, I cracked on with what needed doing to get the car where I wanted her to be for spring. When the back wheels were off, they went back on with fresh lug nuts. You can see from the ones on the front that this axle hadn't been done yet, so the wheels came off. To prevent scratching the inside of the wheel on the brake calipers or disc guard, especially important if the inner surface is painted like mine, I slide the wheels out on my foot as you can see here. It might not sound very technical. You'll also notice the piece of material that I've put on top of the calipers to avoid damage. Now, whilst I'm sure a lot of your favourite YouTubers would have pristine workshops with the hydraulic lifts and painted floors, finished walls, etc., things like this are useful for those of us who don't have that. So you can see here that over time the lug nuts rust and detract from the overall aesthetics of the car, especially if you've had the wheels refurbished. So everything looks great other than that one detail. Like the rears in the last video, the wheels were quickly washed and dried before applying some protection. The front Pirellis were put on when I'd bought the car, so I couldn't really justify replacing them given how much tread and life they had left. My polish of choice here is Turtle Wax Ceramic Polish and Wax. Now, I'm no particular champion for this product, this is just what I happened to be using at the time. It does give a nice shine and does have a wax in it too. That was applied, dried and was buffered off. Next was the wax layer, for which I personally choose a Canuba wax, whatever. Again, this isn't an advert for Turtle Wax, it's just what I happened to be using at the time. I've used Autoglym products for years and always loved them, but by chance when making this video wasn't using them. Applied generously front and back, it was buffered off and I was happy with the results on both wheels. Next up were the calipers. These have been refurbished recently, which along with new decals is a really cost effective way of bringing your car up to a good standard, but you can't always clean these thoroughly with the wheels on, so I used this opportunity to give them some time. I brushed the wheel arches clean, removing any brake dust that a maintenance wash doesn't combat. With the carpet lining looking good, I moved on to tackling the caked on grime and brake dust on the calipers. Warm water and a detergent foamed up nicely. Using a detailing brush allowed me to get into the hard to reach spots not possible during a normal wash. The lather was left to sit whilst I did the other side. After a while of the lather being left to sit, it was rinsed off and finally dried with very satisfying results. With that done and the second cup of coffee on the go, the now protected wheels went back on with fresh lug nuts to complement. These were copper greased and torqued as per Jaguar's demands. Next on the tick list was some detailing, ready for spring get-togethers with mates. I'd purchased my first ever jet wash. I've never liked the idea of blasting paintwork and driving water into areas of the car. I'd made the investment to utilise its snow foam function, which I'd always thought of as a gimmick. I mean, what better way to communicate to the world that you're not a real car guy by spraying snow foam up your exhausts and then starting the car up so a small amount dribbles out the back for an Instagram video. However, now winter was here, I really did want the ability to leave paint contaminants to soak and be washed off before making physical contact with the paint with the wash mitt, so I took the plunge. Now, I've gone for a cheaper brand to test the waters and combined it in the first instance with Autoglym's Polar Blast. I didn't film the wash as there is plenty of snow foam porn out there, but the results proved it to be a useful tool. Once again, with your detailing equipment, make sure it's organised and cleaned from its last use. I'm very used to people asking me how my car is so much better presented than theirs when a brief conversation reveals that they aren't cleaning and, just as importantly, drying their car properly. For shampoo, I'm using Jaguar's Ultimate Wash and Wax. The wax isn't instead of applying a proper coat of wax, but it serves to protect and blacken trim and plastic, leaving a super finish if dried off properly. After cleaning, the next step was a wax. Now, there's no need to do this with a machine. In fact, doing it by hand will probably give better results, but I'm doing it to save time. I'm using a super high-end expensive Bosch dual action, but I'm told there are cheaper alternatives out there. Here I apply the wax to the applicator and then transfer it evenly onto the car. You want to use nice and low speeds here for a wax layer, as we aren't actually correcting the paint, simply applying it on top of a corrected and polished surface. Looking back at this footage, if anything, I could slow down and cover a smaller area in a given time frame. If you're going to talk about masking things up in the comments section, I really don't care for this stage, and I'll only actually ever do it if it's needed. It buffs off to a luster with only a few small imperfections expected for a 10-year-old car. I work my way around the car, being systematic with how it's done. You'll find your own way of working with detailing and find what is most efficient over time. The rear spoiler is done by hand, but these applicators soak up so much product it wastes a lot of wax, and I tend to avoid them. The wax is allowed some time to dry and then buffered off with a fresh microfiber towel. If any carbon fibre parts on your car have got a clear coat, they will still benefit from protection. The dual action machine polisher allows large areas like the bonnet here to be covered, using the hand applicator for difficult to reach spots. As with any detailing, the initial wash is arguably the most important stage and has got to be dried properly as well. Any clay barring and paint correction, i.e. swirl marks, have got to be sorted out first. Blimey, now where does wire wool come into detailing, you ask? Well, not for the paint, but instead the exhaust tips. Carbon builds up and they lose their shine over time. Enhance the look by spending a bit of time on these. Remember, a wax or polish may discolour black rubber trim, so here would be a good time to mask up or remove any that gets on immediately. I start by applying a metal polish to remove oxidation and soot. It sits for a while and then I go over with a fine wire wool to further remove this. It's then wiped off and given a final wipe over with a fresh cloth to bring back a shine. Next up was some leather conditioning. Over time, UV light, extreme changes in temperature from the heater and simple wear and tear can dry the leather of the interior out. I'd definitely recommend for all cars that you condition the leather from time to time to bring back its suppleness and finish. If the interior is particularly dirty, you'll want a task-specific product to actually clean it first. I work the product in by hand and then remove any excess about 5 minutes later. The final tasks, and we are getting pretty boring now, was to top up the screen wash, check the oil levels and also check tyre pressures. Tyre pressures can go down slowly over a few months if the car's being stored over winter, so I checked them and then obviously topped up where it was necessary. I'm very satisfied with the fresh wheel nuts, complemented by a fresh lick of tyre gel, the recently refurbished wheels and the cleaned up calipers. The car is ready for spring and hopefully it won't be too long until she comes out of hibernation. If you've made it to the end, thank you very much. I hope I've given you some ideas and you can continue to work on your car, spend time with it despite national restrictions and the dreadful weather. Huge thanks to those that have subscribed and I will catch you next time.